This is CBC Vancouver News.
The Government of Canada accepts responsibility for this historic injustice.
Canada's apology to the Williams Creek First Nation for historic wrongs. Also,
we're trying to make sure that we all stay strong.
British Columbians pay their respects to the lives lost in Morocco's devastating earthquake. And calls for an independent Sikh state in India. More on the unofficial votes taking place in BC and the Kalistan movement. Good evening, I'm Baneet Braich. Thanks for joining us. Tonight, Vancouver police are investigating a triple stabbing in Chinatown. It happened at the Light Up Chinatown Festival near Columbia and Kiefer Street. Police say the three festival goers were attacked by a stranger just before 6 p.m. All three victims have non-life-threatening injuries. VPD says a 60-year-old man has been taken into custody and the motive for the attack is unknown. In a statement, Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim and the festival organizer Carol Lee say the violence is heartbreaking. They say their thoughts are with the victims and their families. Today's Canada's Federal Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations was in Williams Lake to apologize for illegal settlement of its village lands.
The Government of Canada accepts responsibility for this historic injustice and expresses its deepest regret and sincere apology to the people of Williams Lake First Nation.
Chris Wycott, the nation's councillor, has been working on the village land claim for 30 years.
You know, when I was sitting in the archives in 1993, I never thought that would come to the day where we're finally standing here and getting an apology from Canada.
After repeated appeals, the courts eventually ruled in favor of the Williams Lake First Nation. The apology comes a year after a $135 million settlement was reached with the First Nation, with the potential for the community to acquire 14,000 acres of additional reserve land.
The annual interest that will be generated from that trust are going to allow us to do whatever we want. There is nothing that is out of the realm of possibility for the Williams Lake First Nation.
Chief Sellers says this settlement will help the community for generations and is an example of reconciliation in action. After Morocco's deadly earthquake, rescuers are scrambling to save people through the rubble. Here in Vancouver, the local Moroccan community gathered for a vigil. CBC's Liam Britton spoke to those showing support and solidarity.
The reading of a passage from the Quran to offer solace and peace in a harrowing time.
Oh yeah, I'm very sad because again you feel your powerlessness.
At the Vancouver Art Gallery, signs, flags, and people coming together to show their support for a country reeling.
I had my own son in Marrakesh, and as soon as I learned, I called him, and he told me he was terrified. That was really something. We are not used to that.
His son is safe, but the 6.8 magnitude earthquake that struck late Friday has left over 2,000 dead. 2,400 are hurt, and the toll is expected to rise. The epicenter was southwest of Marrakesh, and crews faced a powerful aftershock today. This organizer of Sunday's vigil says British Columbians with connections to Morocco are heartbroken.
We all feel like one community, and we're trying to make sure that we all stay strong and, ready to help others as always. That's what we do.
She's thankful her family is okay, but says some here aren't so lucky. Her association has been consoling one woman whose aunt and uncle were killed and her grandmother critically hurt.
So that's an example of how we are directly affected with that. It's not like just hearing others or watching the news, but we are affected.
Canada's foreign minister says this country is getting ready to help Morocco and is currently assessing the country's needs. Now, the Morocco House Association says they are also looking for other ways to help the country, but today they're focused on lifting the spirits of a community in need of solace. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC residents are seeing a lot of black bears up north. Now, it's around this time of the year where they bulk up before going to hibernation. But more bears means more complaints, which can lead to more being killed. It's why some residents say they won't report sightings anymore.
I have never called a conservation officer, and I have difficulty imagining a situation in which I would. I think that if I were to have a negative encounter with a bear, I suspect that I would blame myself.
The BC Conservation Officer Service says August saw more than 2,200 bear complaints. It led to 36 bears being killed in northern BC. Experts say it's important not to attract the animals in the first place. This means clean the barbecues, keep garbage locked, and have smell-proof containers. And this was the scene in Surrey today as people lined up to vote for a separate Sikh state in India. What the vote means and what's behind it, that's coming up next. To Surrey now, where thousands gathered at the Guru Nanak Gurdwara. It's where US-based group 6 for Justice held what it calls a referendum. Now, they say it's to create an independent Sikh homeland in India called Kalistan. Loud chants as long lines stretch to the Gurdwara. The votes taking place here are not legally binding in India. 6 for Justice says the goal is to bring the results to the United Nations and gather support for a Sikh homeland. The vote has been on a world tour since 2021, including London, Melbourne, and Ontario. It eventually hopes to hold a vote in Punjab in 2025. But 6 for Justice is banned by the Indian government, who accuses the group of supporting violent extremism. That's according to charges filed in New Delhi in January 2020. Calls for Kalistan have reignited leading up to India's election next year. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is facing criticism over high inflation, unemployment, and a failed attempt to bring in new farm laws. And now for a deeper look into the Kalistan movement. Experts say the history of the movement is complex, emotional, and evolving. CBC News spoke to 5 academics who weighed in on some of the history that has brought international attention to the movement. And a warning, there are some graphic images viewers may find disturbing.
The topic of Kalistan is very complex, but the meaning, the land of the pure, is consistent.
Defining Kalistan, the diaspora, is a bit complicated. I feel that we've decided that Kalistan is a separate state within the nation state of India that is run by people who are Khalsas, who are Sikhs.
For the Indian state, the Kalistan movement is seen as a violent movement that threatens the territorial sovereignty of India.
It's an idea that has been developed over time, but that is steeped in history.
And when a government or an institution erases the history or tampers with religion, you will see resistance.
There's different points of the history which are significant. We can go as far back as the colonial period through Maharaja Ranjit Singh, a kingdom centered in the capital being Lahore.
Maharaja Singh is a tangible historical marker that plays a very important role in showing that actually there is a possibility of Sikh rule, successful Sikh rule.
But it wasn't until the British came when his empire crumbled. So I think people go back to that golden age and dream that that is something that we will get back, where we will be autonomous, where we will know our boundaries.
One of the ways is talked about is to have that return to the Sikhs, right? What that looks like, as I mentioned, is debated.
Muslims were saying, we want out. We want our own country. We don't want to be ruled by the Hindus. And they were afforded East Pakistan and West Pakistan. Punjab was divided. 3/4 of Punjab went to Pakistan. 6 stayed with India.
In the 1940s, Kalistan was part of the discussion post-partition, and this was important because it led to questions concerning the Sikh identity, the Sikhs themselves not having a homeland.
In the new Punjab, they were again a minority.
After partition, I think Punjabis and Sikhs thought that they did get the short end of the stick, because soon after that, as India developed as a nation state, there was a big stress on Punjab to feed the rest of India, because it was still a burgeoning population and very little food.
Punjab is the breadbasket feeding all of India, yet infrastructurally it was neglected. All of these really adversely affected the farmers, but also the social conditions of the institutions, the judiciary, the police.
This is setting the stage up for a feeling that Sikhs do not belong in the Indian nation state, and that there will be no equality, that they will be second-class citizens.
Sant Jarnel Bindranwale. The charismatic preacher was a leading proponent of a separate Sikh state named Kalistan.
Bindranwale preached a fiery message mixing religion and nationalism. Moderate Sikh leaders are opposed to separatism, but now they say Bindranwale's death will make him a martyr.
I think the leaders that came forward, like Jarnail Singh Bindranwale, came out of a sense of resistance and unrest.
He would often say that, I'm not asking for Khalistan, but if Indira Gandhi's administration wants to give Sikhs Khalistan, and that's the way that Sikhs can become sovereign, then we'll take it.
He was actually a saint to begin with, simply asking for social reforms. On the other hand, he also created an aura that he could kill anyone.
Bindranwale took up residence in the Golden Temple. From his fortified sanctuary there, he presided over a ruthless campaign of bombing, sabotage, and assassination that claimed hundreds of lives.
Even Bindranwale, who was obviously one of the most militant Sikh leaders, he mobilized a lot of Sikhs. Especially the Hindus, they get scared that you are targeting us. It leads to 1984 entry of the army in Golden Temple.
It took an entire battalion of Indian troops backed by tanks and rockets to storm the Sikh Golden Temple in Amritsar.
Bloodletting began in earnest on the 5th of June, 1984. Codenamed Operation Blue Star, the Indian Army, on orders from Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, attacked the Golden Temple.
So 1984 is a seminal moment in our history because after the Golden Temple, which to us is a sacred site of worship and of religious history, was bombed attacked by the Indian government. It was sealed off. A lot of people died within it, pilgrims and others who were there at the time, innocent people.
The state narrative here is that this is meant to rout out terrorists or militants or fundamentalists who had come in to disrupt the sanctity of the temple precincts and who had refused to leave despite many attempts to get them out.
You ask the Indian government's position is there were a lot of terrorists who had moved in Golden Temple.
Until this week, the Golden Temple was the one place Mrs. Gandhi had not dared challenge the Sikh militants. But the assassination of 2 Hindu politicians in May was the last straw. 6 days ago, Mrs. Gandhi sent tens of thousands of soldiers into the Punjab for a showdown with Bindranwale.
This group is blamed for not leaving, and the blame is squarely put on them for the attack and the devastation.
The guns and weapons. Now, who supplied him the guns? That's $1 million question.
Bindranwale died in a hail of bullets, along with as many as 500 of his supporters.
So what happens over that week is difficult to discern, partly because of the amount of misinformation, but thousands of Sikhs lose their lives.
Shops and businesses all over the country closed their doors and Indians crowded into the streets. But the shock soon gave way to anger. The 66-year-old Prime Minister was the victim of gunmen identified as Sikh extremists. Her murder, the apparent culmination of a 2-year campaign of terror for the creation of an independent Sikh state.
And immediately the first news that comes out is that 2 Sikh bodyguards have killed her.
This is quickly afterwards followed by the assassination of Indira Gandhi, seen as a retribution killing. And then several days of attacking, killing, maiming, raping, and torturing Sikhs in the capital in Delhi.
There was the systematic interrogation and arrests of Sikh youth. So it was literally almost like cleaning out parts of India.
Really grotesque violence. Mothers who were raped, in front of their sons, and then killed, only to have the daughter raped before the father and brother.
What happens in India from now on will have tremendous impact on whether tensions continue to mount in Canada. Rajiv Gandhi was not able to prevent the massacre of Sikhs after his mother's death. The picture tells the horror, but many people suspect the whole story is not being told.
The commissions that have read that time and have written reports on that time say that government was involved, police was involved. The Sikhs have never forgiven India for that.
The discourse around it has been controlled to a great degree by India, which certainly sees it as a terrorist movement. Why? Because of some elements within the movement who have been attracted to the acquisition of arms, militarized training, and militant behavior. However, there are many parts of it that are not linked to violence or militancy, but rather to the autonomy of the Punjab, the economic development of the Punjab.
This is the biggest problem in studying the Kalistan movement, is what is truth, what is fact. After 1984, it was a violent confrontation on both sides.
Then the Air India bombing happens.
Air India Flight 182, bound for New Delhi, explodes off the coast of Ireland.
Air India was one of the biggest acts of terrorism in our Canadian history, which, unfortunately, so many Canadians don't really understand or know about.
329 people are killed.
This is where Tahir Sadiq came to learn that, yes, indeed, his mother was dead.
Her name was Sugra Sadiq, age 65, a retired doctor going home for a visit.
My mother.
On June 23rd every year, I hear from people who've lost their classmates, their colleagues, friends from the neighborhood. There's so many people who've been touched by this tragedy, and there's been no justice for their loved ones, for our loved ones.
So that really festered in people a wound that I think has not ever again been really has not healed, because there's been no resolution.
The issue has been who's responsible.
We don't know who did it, but it was linked to the movement of Kalistan.
And I would argue that the activism in Canada is unique and distinct because of Air India. And it has impacted identity formation for many Sikh men in particular, who now feel that they feel a violent gaze conferred onto their turban.
The chants make it clear what this was all about. A call for an independent Sikh state known as Kalistan.
Hundreds of community members and supporters of the Kalistan movement came together, all to commemorate the life of Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Outside of a certain range of flashpoints in the Punjab, broadly speaking, in India, Kalistan is not a major issue. The context, I think, of Sikhs broadly is also relevant. It's about 1.5 to 2% of the Indian population. India is a vast entity with almost 1.5 billion people.
Quite interestingly, the movement is only in diaspora. In Punjab, you don't see this movement.
Kalistan is always changing in terms of how it's being envisioned by the next generation. And so the Sikh diaspora today in Canada, in England, in America, in Australia are questioning identity, and their identity is formed around the activism confronting inequality.
We live in this global context where this is a festering wound, if you want to think of it. The term Kalistan is one of the ways that people can express this frustration.
Contemporary ideas of Kalistan continue to be fraught with difficulty, with polarization, with people on one side or the other. But I think if greater minds came together, perhaps at a round table or a discussion, perhaps we can understand the past so we can create a better future, if that is the future we want.
And here's a live shot of Cambie Street. I'll have your full forecast next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. September is Literacy Month. Have fun and support the cause by joining CBC Vancouver's Dan Burrett at Dakota's Team Trivia Challenge on September 27th. For tickets, register at dakota.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
It's time now to take a look at your BC-wide weather forecast. Let's start with your current temperatures. It's a mixed bag. It's 21 degrees in Vancouver, 23 on the island in Victoria. Hope is much hotter at 27 degrees. Kamloops also seeing around 30 degrees as well. Let's move on to what we can expect tomorrow. So lots of refreshing rain for much of the province and cooler temperatures. 14 degrees in Dease Lake, 19 degrees in Victoria. In the interior, it's mostly cloudy with some sunshine. Kamloops seeing the highest temperatures there as well at 27 degrees. And what are we expecting for your 5-day forecast? Well, the week begins with showers, mostly cloud on Wednesday with a high of 21 degrees, and sunny skies return Thursday and Friday. And that is your late news for this Sunday. Thanks so much for watching. For news at any hour, you can always go to our website, cbc.ca/bc. Good night.